What you are about to see is a shocking revelation made by Ben Meiselas, a serious, urgent, and impossible-to-ignore warning. For the first time, frightening details about Donald Trump's health are coming to light, and the truth is much more serious than the public imagines.
Donald Trump was pretty much sleeping through much of the cabinet meeting today when he was not saying other deranged things. Release those MRI results right now. I mean, some of the deranged things that Trump was saying at the cabinet meeting is that he got an A on a cognitive exam, and people were like laughing in the room. There's nothing funny about what he's saying. I mean, he looks utterly deranged. And we saw that he released a doctor's note, which he claimed were MRI results. And when you actually look at what this doctor note says, first off, it's not an MRI result. It talks about Trump received a comprehensive executive physical. Advanced imaging was performed because men in his age group benefit from a thorough evaluation of cardiovascular and abdominal health. The purpose of this imaging is preventative, to identify issues early, confirm overall health, and ensure he maintains long-term vitality and function. Any serious doctor will tell you that what was written right there is not a real thing. I mean, you don't get preventative cardiovascular and abdominal MRIs. It's also a strange place of the body if you were just to make up and conceive of a MRI for preventative issues, which you shouldn't. The fact that it wouldn't be of the spine and the brain and focus on abdominal issues is also another red flag. But I'll bring in some doctors who we'll talk about in a moment. But first, I just want to show you, I mean, like literally, Trump was sleeping through much of this cabinet hearing. So here's Donald Trump listening to RFK Jr. Just watch Trump. He's asleep. Here, play this clip.
If you lived in New Jersey and you moved to Oregon and you got injured, you went to a hospital, you would have to spend maybe 45 minutes filling out forms on a clipboard, because your doctors there could not get your healthcare records. They couldn't get your blood type.
Hello, wake up, Donald. Hello. I mean, this is serious stuff. I mean, here is Donald Trump listening to another cabinet member, Doug Burgum. Here, let's play this clip.
Been thrilled to be part of the National Park Service, the U.S. Park Police, part of this great effort across a number of us on making D.C. safe and beautiful.
Then we have Donald Trump trying to say Buttigieg's last name. And I mean, his behavior is resembling like a very badly behaved first grader. They don't even behave this bad. Here, play this clip.
Building the air traffic control under boot edge. That's supposed to be boot edge. Who's another grossly incompetent person? He'd get in his bicycle, ride to work. And he was just terrible. What they do is they take the fiber optics and they take fiber, trying to hook it into copper. And fiber and copper don't mix. You can't do it. But people knew that for the last 30 years since they started doing the fiber. And they spent billions of dollars and it didn't work. And you saw that by the helicopter crash. You saw that by into the plane. You saw that by a lot of things.
They're laughing. And there's nothing, I mean, it's very strange behavior. Then you had Caroline Leavitt saying this yesterday about Trump's MRI. Let's play it.
And can I follow up on the MRI? Because President Trump yesterday said that he would release the results of his MRI. Is that happening right now?
It is happening right now. As part of, and this is a summary from the president's physician, and we will release it right now. I think my team has it teed up for all of you. I'll read it for you, and then you'll get it physically as well.
Now, that wasn't an MRI result. That was the note that I read for you, which is not an MRI exam. Donald Trump said the following about a physical, that he got all A's on everything. Here, play this clip.
I took my physical. I got all A's, everything. But they said to me, would you like to take a cognitive test? I said, is it hard? They said, yes. I said, well, I'm a very smart person. Who was the last president to take one? No president has ever agreed to take one. Because when you get into the mid-questions, meaning, 10, question number 10, 11, 12, 28, 30, they get harder and harder. And they said, would you like to do it? I said, well, no reason to do it. Nobody's ever done it. I'll do it maybe, but there's really no reason. They said, sir, the problem is this is Walter Reed Hospital. And that's a military hospital. And that means that things are, sort of open. It's not like private where you have, if you do poorly, we'll have to, probably you'll find out. I said, I won't do poorly. I'm a smart person, not a stupid person. And as the doctor will tell you, I aced it, right, Susie? I aced. I got every question right. And these are tough questions. These are questions that I would say 99% of the people that I'm talking to right now, meaning the people from the fake news, would not do well in those exams.
One of the tells right there is when Donald Trump looks to a member sitting in the table. He said, right, Susie, right? She's not a physician. I mean, Susie Wiles is who he's referring to as his chief of staff. And, as the people in that room are like laughing and coddling what we're seeing as clear cognitive deterioration, it just kind of makes the scene extra distressing. I want to bring in Dr. Vin Gupta, who leads Midas Health. And Dr. Gupta, you've been leading the national conversation on this. And of course, you've been leading the national conversation on public health policy, but you've been just calling out that this behavior is not normal, and that the explanations that are being given about the MRIs are not normal. Let's just focus. Let's start first on the MRI and the doctor's note. Let's comment on that abdominal preventative care MRI. What do you say about that?
Well, Ben, I had a chance to speak to a lot of radiology colleagues at the best academic institutions in the country over the last 24 hours because, I want to make sure that we're getting the very best expertise across specialties for Midas and Midas Health. No one is aware of getting an MRI of the torso, which is what the results that were summarized in the physician's note that Carolyn Levitt read out. It doesn't exist. They had justified getting an MRI of the torso for primary screening of some sort of medical process because he's older. And, that doesn't exist. I'm not aware, my colleagues across the spectrum in radiology are not aware of that type of screening process. You just don't do it. And I think the fact that they reported only the cardiovascular and abdominal findings is odd. Why? Did he get a full body MRI because that's in vogue amongst a certain subsegment of society, and they just reported the cardiac and the abdominal findings? Okay, then why did they leave out everything else? Did they just get a torso MRI? Why? There is no clinical guideline that exists. And again, these are the most credentialed radiologists in the country. I challenge anybody to find a group of folks that is more credentialed and more accomplished and knows, what to do and when to do MRIs than the folks I've spoken with. No one is aware of any type of screening guideline to say, yes, as you age, get an MRI of the heart and of your abdomen. So the whole thing is just unusual. And the fact that they're drawing attention to it and that he's teased it, now drawing more attention to it, it doesn't make any sense. I think they're creating more problems for themselves than they're actually solving. This is all his own creation and his team's creation, letting things out drip, drip, drip. Without any obvious alignment with clinical guidelines. And, his supporters, I've gotten some critiques from his supporters on social saying, well, gosh, he's pointing to any number of data points saying, well, this all makes sense. From a medical standpoint, none of this comports, and that's clear. MRIs are not used as primary screening tools, Ben, as we've talked about. But the fact that they just chose to focus on the heart and the abdominal findings honestly makes no sense. And this has been vetted across the spectrum with external experts as well. So again, they're creating more problems for themselves, if you ask me, and creating more questions to be answered than they're actually solving.
Now, talk about his behavior. And one of the things that you and I have been very mindful of is to not speculate, but to simply report the observational, objective things that we're seeing. So last night, Donald Trump, around midnight or so, posted anywhere, if you count the reposts, anywhere from 150 to like 400 posts over and over and over again with some of the most deranged conspiracies that Michelle Obama was actually running the Biden White House and she was the one pardoning people, stuff like that. Then today, he starts the day late, as we've seen before, and has this cabinet meeting. kind of early afternoon. And then the one public appearance that he's really made in the day, the first one, right? We saw him falling asleep over and over again, throughout it. And then when he did speak, we showed you it's Pete, Boo, Da, Jed, Jed. And I understand that I guess he thinks he's mocking Pete Buttigieg, but that behavior is troubling. So what do you make of this, what seems to be deteriorating behavior, even over the past week?
It's an information void. I'll say as an observer, just like you, and what do we know? Clearly, it looks like he's not getting enough sleep or he's just more fatigued. I think the New York Times did extensive reporting that him and his team have panned, but it seems like they're reporting on his fatigue and his functionality is bearing out in his public appearances. So that's what we know. It's been documented through significant reporting. To your point, erratic behavior, which either is a hallmark of who he is as a person, because we've seen elements of that over the last 10 to 15 years since he's been in politics. Or one could say it's getting worse, more frequent, which I think is the case, to your point on social posting last night. These trend lines here, more fatigue. I continue to go back to how he comported himself when somebody fainted in the Oval Office, didn't really show any signs of concern, just general apathy, inattention. And then, yes, the erratic behavior looking to be more frequent. These are what we know. These are what we're observing. And then when you couple that with just the fact that they're letting things out drip, 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 they don't really make any medical sense. Again, if you talk to credentialed physicians that know what they're talking about in radiology, they're just creating more questions than they're answering. And that's the problem.
Now, before we go, I want to just kind of let you get the final word here. What should we be looking for? Like, what data should we actually have here in a normal scenario so that we could answer these questions?
They should just release, since again, his team has made this MRI such a focal point. No one else did. They raised it. It was in the note. People were wondering, well, why are you getting the MRI? That's unusual. And then his team and then the surround sound around him said, well, people get our MRIs now. It's not an abnormal thing, which is not true. So I think he's the leader of the free world. He is the sitting president. His health, we all hope that, I'll say this, speaking just as a physician, we want the president to be as healthy as possible. He's the duly elected leader of the country. And so if there's something wrong, the people should know. And the people deserve transparency about his health. I think this presidential health has become such in focus over the last few years, rightfully so. You have the oldest presidents on record, the last two. I think this is something that should be exonerated. But just release the actual MRI read, just the read from the radiologist versus a filtered, summarized read from his physician, who again has editorialized in the past already. We don't want that. Just release the actual read. What and why? Why was just a torso MRI done? If a full body was done, just release the read and let people make their own determination.
Dr. Gupta, I know you got to run. I just want to close the loop on one more thing. In the experts that you speak to and in your own practice, have you ever heard of somebody taking these cognitive exams that Trump keeps saying he's taking like every 3 months or 6 months? Have you ever heard of that? Like with that level of frequency?
No. Nobody takes a Montreal Cognitive Assessment, MoCA for short, which it focuses on recall, memory loss, basic things. Mild cognitive dysfunction is what it tends to sort of screen for. It's not a great tool. No one takes it with this type of frequency. I was on with Nicole Wallace yesterday, and I thought she said it beautifully. Saying that you're passing it every other week is not some sort of flex here that he thinks it is. It's an unusual thing to keep boasting about. Doing it as frequently as he's doing makes no sense. I don't know any neurologist that would recommend doing a MoCA with that type of frequency. And again, it's not the flex that I think he thinks it is.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. What we're seeing today in the Trump administration is not just an isolated episode of fatigue, nor a curious moment to turn into a meme. It is a symptom, and a serious symptom of a cognitive and behavioral deterioration that any responsible person should be observing with seriousness. And I say this as someone who has followed American politics for decades, who understands how power works, how institutional structures operate, and the real impact a president's behavior has inside and outside the United States. What we saw in the cabinet meeting was simply alarming. It is not normal, it is not acceptable, and it cannot be treated as just another Trump eccentricity. He literally fell asleep during significant portions of the statements made by members of his own cabinet. We're talking about a president who cannot stay awake even while his advisors present reports on security, infrastructure, public administration. Imagine what happens off camera. Imagine urgent decisions arriving at 3 in the morning. Imagine international crises that require readiness and clarity. This is the man in charge. And when Trump wasn't sleeping, he was rambling. Delusional, to be more precise, repeating disconnected stories about cognitive tests in which he supposedly got a perfect score. That is the speech of someone who is insecure, deeply insecure about his own mental capacity. That is not the speech of a confident president. It is psychological compensation, a performance to hide fragility. And the most concerning part is that no one in that room had the courage to confront the obvious. On the contrary, they laughed, lowered their heads, pretended everything was normal. They laughed while the President of the United States appeared disoriented. They laughed while he relied on canned phrases, meaningless, completely out of context. This, to me, is the clearest portrait of an administration that has lost control of its own narrative. And then comes the supposed medical report. I will insist on this because it's serious. That document does not correspond to anything practiced in modern medicine. No specialist recognizes the so-called preventive trunk MRI. That doesn't exist. No clinical guideline recommends it. Experienced radiologists from leading institutions have openly stated what was released is at minimum suspicious, at most a complete fabrication to cover up what is really happening. And if everything were fine with Donald Trump, why invent an exam that the entire medical community says does not exist? Why publish a vague, evasive report full of poorly placed technical terms, without objective data, without concrete results, without formal conclusions? It is obvious that something is being hidden, and that is the problem. We're not talking about an ordinary citizen. We're talking about the president. We're talking about someone who makes decisions that affect the lives of millions of people. And meanwhile, Trump remains immersed in erratic behavior. He posts hundreds of messages in just a few hours, repeats conspiracy theories, baseless accusations, attacks on public figures, delirious insinuations about Barack and Michelle Obama. This pattern is not just politically irresponsible, it is cognitively concerning. People in cognitive decline, especially under stress, exhibit exactly this kind of behavior. Compulsive repetition, fixation on conspiratorial ideas, confusion between fantasy and reality, difficulty maintaining focus. And honestly, if it were any other president displaying this set of symptoms, excessive sleep, confusion, delusions, dubious medical reports, the Republican Party would be in a frenzy calling for independent examinations and waiving the 25th Amendment. But because it's Trump, they remain silent. And that silence is complicit. It is dangerous. It is unethical. And there's more. The infantilized, almost cartoonish behavior of constantly mocking names like Pete Buttigieg's is not humor. It is cognitive regression. It is an inability to maintain composure. It is the style of someone who is losing the ability to filter impulses. This is not firmness. This is not strength. This is not speaking without filters. It is mental fragility displayed on camera for the whole world to see. And I'll tell you more.
A democracy cannot survive when a president is no longer fit to perform the duties of the office and yet remains shielded by a network of staff and allies willing to lie in order to maintain an illusory image of stability. Collective lying is a massive institutional risk because when the entire administration is dedicated to covering up the president's incapacity, it is not only his reputation that is at stake, it's national security. The truth needs to be stated plainly, without fear, without softening. Donald Trump does not demonstrate today the lucidity or competence required to perform the office he holds. The signs are clear, repeated, documented, and increasingly evident. Continuing to pretend that everything is fine is to neglect the duty to protect the country. And what deeply frightens me is seeing a portion of Americans simply accept as if it were normal a president sleeping in meetings, saying things that make no sense, losing himself in sentences, reacting like a child when confronted, and frantically posting conspiracy theories in the middle of the night. That is not leadership. That is not stability. That is not security. That is a risk. And I ask you with complete honesty, how long will we allow a visibly unstable president to remain in command of the country as if nothing were happening? How long will the fear of facing the truth matter more than the responsibility to the nation?